Mátyás Rákosi was one of the most significant yet reviled figures in modern Hungarian history. Often referred to as Stalin's best pupil, Rákosi ruled Hungary with an iron grip during the height of the Cold War. Between 1945 and 1956, he rose from exile and obscurity to become the uncontested leader of a Soviet satellite state. Obsessed with ideological purity and political control, he was the architect of Hungary's Stalinist transformation. But his obsession with total control, his brutality in purging enemies real and imagined, and his catastrophic economic policies would all contribute to his spectacular fall and Hungary's explosive 1956 revolution. Rákosi was born Mátyás Rosenfeld on March 9, 1892, in Oder, a small town located in the Kingdom of Hungary, which at the time was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He came from a Jewish family, the son of József Rosenfeld, a shopkeeper, and Cecilia Lederer. The family was not religiously devout, and Rákosi would later adopt atheism and Marxism, rejecting his heritage in favor of class struggle and revolutionary activism. Rákosi studied at the University of Budapest and later at the University of Berlin. It was during these formative years that he became involved in left-wing student movements. His early exposure to socialism and Marxist literature, combined with the growing disillusionment with the crumbling Habsburg Empire, laid the ideological foundation for his future as a communist agitator. Rákosi served in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I. In 1915, he was captured by Russian forces and spent the remainder of the war in Siberian prison camps. But this misfortune turned into an ideological rebirth. As the Russian Revolution unfolded in 1917, Rákosi found himself in the midst of a seismic political transformation. He was released by the Bolsheviks and eventually joined the communist movement in Russia, embracing Leninist ideology. This experience profoundly radicalized him. For Rákosi, the collapse of the Tsarist regime and the rise of proletarian rule in Russia was not just history unfolding, it was a political template. After the war, he returned to Hungary with renewed revolutionary fervor, determined to replicate the Soviet model. In 1919, Hungary saw the brief emergence of a communist government under Bela Kun. Rákosi was a key figure in this experiment, serving as People's Commissar for Trade. The Kun regime lasted only 133 days and collapsed amid chaos, economic disintegration, and military pressure from Romania. After the fall of the Soviet Republic, Rákosi fled Hungary to avoid the White Terror, unleashed by Admiral Miklos Horthy's counter-revolutionary regime. He spent time in Austria and Germany before settling in the Soviet Union in the early 1920s, where he deepened his connections with the Comintern. While many émigré communists were later caught in Stalin's purges, Rákosi managed to survive and thrive. His loyalty, bureaucratic discipline, and ideological rigidity earned him favor with Stalin. He became an agent of the Comintern, engaged in propaganda, organizational work, and intelligence. In 1935, Rákosi was arrested in Hungary while trying to organize underground communist activities and was imprisoned for nearly a decade. During World War II, Rákosi was held in various Hungarian prisons. His release in 1940 was part of a prisoner exchange between the Horthy regime and the Soviet Union. An ironic twist, given that Rákosi would later help erase Horthy's entire legacy. He spent the war years in the USSR, emerging in 1945 with the Red Army and his political baggage. In 1945, Hungary was devastated by war and occupation. The Red Army's victory brought not only liberation from the Nazis, but Soviet domination. Backed by Stalin, Rákosi returned as leader of the Hungarian Communist Party. Though the Communists had limited popular support, winning only 17% of the vote in 1945, Rákosi employed a cunning political strategy dubbed salami tactics, slicing off opposition parties one by one through intimidation, propaganda, and arrests. Between 1945 and 1948, Rákosi orchestrated the absorption of the Social Democratic Party, discredited the Smallholders Party, and dismantled Hungary's parliamentary democracy. By 1949, the Communists had full control. That same year, the People's Republic of Hungary was declared, and Rákosi, now General Secretary of the Hungarian Working People's Party, held supreme power. This was Rákosi's most powerful and darkest period. Emulating Stalin's methods, he constructed a totalitarian state characterized by terror, surveillance, and ideological purity. The AVH, State Protection Authority, modeled after the Soviet NKVD, became his personal tool of repression. Thousands of enemies of the people, bourgeois intellectuals, former aristocrats, clergy, rival communists, and even average citizens, were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. One of the most infamous events was the 1949 show trial and execution of Laszlo Rajk, a former foreign minister and loyal communist accused of Titoism and espionage. This marked the beginning of internal party purges that would claim many high-ranking officials. Rákosi introduced a rigid 5-year plan in 1950, prioritizing heavy industry over consumer goods or agriculture. Factories were built, quotas set, and workers pushed to exhaustion, all while food and housing shortages worsened. Forced collectivization devastated the rural economy. Hungary's peasants were driven into state-run cooperatives, triggering resistance and famine. Like Stalin, Rákosi cultivated an almost religious veneration of himself. Statues of Rákosi were erected. His birthday was a national holiday and children were taught to idolize him. His speeches were broadcast on the radio, his portraits adorned classrooms and factories. All dissent was deemed counter-revolutionary. In 1953, Stalin died. The entire Soviet bloc was thrust into uncertainty. Nikita Khrushchev began dismantling the most extreme elements of Stalinism, advocating for a thaw and criticizing the abuses of the past. Under pressure from Moscow, Rákosi was forced to resign as prime minister and hand the post to Imre Nagy, a moderate reformist. Nagy's new course policies reversed collectivization, relaxed censorship, and improved consumer production. The public welcomed the reforms, and for a brief moment, Hungary seemed to be moving toward a more humane socialism. Rákosi, however, remained party chief. He quietly sabotaged Nagy's reforms and lobbied Moscow for support. In 1955, he succeeded in removing Nagy from office. But his return to power was short-lived. The people had lost faith in him, and the party was fractured. He was seen as a relic of a dark era, unable to adapt or reform. The final nail in Rákosi's coffin came in 1956, following Khrushchev's secret speech denouncing Stalin's crimes. Public discontent exploded into mass demonstrations. Protesters called for Rákosi's removal, free elections, and withdrawal from the Warsaw Pact. Statues of Stalin were toppled, including the giant one in Budapest's Stalin Square, a potent symbol of Rákosi's collapsing order. In July 1956, Rákosi was ousted under direct Soviet orders and replaced by Erno Gero, another hardliner. But Gero's unpopularity only fanned the flames of dissent. In October, the Hungarian Revolution broke out in full force. Though the revolution was crushed by Soviet tanks, it marked the irrevocable end of Rákosi's political career. He fled to the Soviet Union, where he lived in obscurity and exile. Rákosi spent his final years in the USSR, living in the city of Gorky, now Nizhny Novgorod. Cut off from power and disgraced, he wrote defensive memoirs that minimized his crimes and blamed others for Hungary's failures. The Hungarian communist leadership refused to allow his return. He died on February 5, 1971, at age 78, largely forgotten except by historians and victims of his regime. His ashes were returned to Hungary in 2000, but even in death, he remained a divisive figure. His grave in Budapest's Farkasréti cemetery is marked only modestly, far removed from the bombast of his earlier life. Mátyás Rákosi's legacy is one of fear, suffering, and ideological madness. His dictatorship ushered in one of the darkest eras in Hungary's 20th century history. He destroyed democratic institutions, wrecked the economy, and turned Hungary into a Soviet puppet. His paranoia and devotion to Stalinism turned a war-ravaged but hopeful nation into a police state. But perhaps the most damning indictment is this: even many of his fellow communists came to see him as a liability. His fall was not just a political shift, it was a purge of his style of leadership from history. Hungarians today remember him as a cautionary tale of tyranny cloaked in revolutionary rhetoric. His era remains a symbol of how totalitarianism, even in the name of equality, can destroy a nation's soul. Rákosi's story is not just about one man, it is a mirror of 20th century totalitarianism. His rise through ideological purity and political cunning, his rule by fear and repression, and his eventual downfall amid popular revolt reflect the broader currents of the Cold War world. In the end, Mátyás Rákosi tried to mold Hungary in Stalin's image, but instead he ignited a revolution. In Hungary's long struggle for freedom, Rákosi represents the darkest night before the dawn. Thanks for watching. For more bite-sized bits of blistering history, please like and subscribe.